Words, actions, and symbols. Patterns, images. These are the things that are recorded within the subconscious, mind control. This is the unconscious triggering of the impulses that keep you in that theta wave state. Anchoring to a set of these thoughts, native to the preconditioned sets of the traumas and the events that brought you into that existence. The emotional imbalances, the triggers, activate those native stimuli in the shadow self. What you see outside of you are those bins of light maintained by you looking and attached to those anchors. You are the program and you are the programmer. The ultraviolet light focused to the scope of in which those buzzwords activate in the imbalance of your emotional state. Until you learn it, you're always gonna need it. Welcome to the G.O.D podcast. Season 4, episode 6, Buzzword. Exploring the words of attachment. Let's get into this. Great awakening, grand rising, divine day, and blessed be, may the day be everything you require to create everything you desire. This goes to the kings and the queens, the adepts and the initiates, the gods, the goddesses, the titans, the chaos beings, the shamans, shamanesses, magis, brujas, witches, warlocks, healers. This especially goes out to the ones that are coming to the healing process. Welcome to the G.O.D podcast. Remember, today is the only day that matters. You are the only one that matters. Because from this point, we understand everything is an observation and or an experience. And everything that is experienced don't have to be observed, and everything that's observed don't got to be experienced, you did? This week we getting into buzzwords. Understanding the words of attachment. For this week's session, we're going to get into the anchoring, attaching to the old definition, that Ptsd or that Stockholm Syndrome, predestination, when one doesn't affirm the initial history, of course it repeats itself, and then we're going to get into phantom nemesis. The act of creating a relationship with the projection. But before we get into that, you know we gotta get that reading in. Oh yeah. I'm your host of Master Ceremonies, your occult psychologist, Papa Lucifer. Turn it up. Whether you working out, you sitting back getting your day started, thank you for tuning in. It's time to tap out of humanity and tap into that higher level. Let's get into this. Ashe. You know I had to get y'all ready for that reading real quick. Hey. Weekly reading with Papa Lucifer. Card shuffle up real quick. You want me to hit on them shuffle? First card is the Queen of Swords. Second card, King of Wands. Third card, Three of Pentacles. Fourth card, the Death card. And there's going to be a lot of rebirth and transition in this one. And the fifth card is the Page of Wands. The Queen of Wands illustrates the aspects of nourishing your power and understanding exactly where you at. I'm feeling that energy in the vibe. I'm loving this spread in that. But the Queen of Swords represents the aspect of stepping forward in that clarity and that vision. You know exactly what you need to be doing at this point in time. You have come to this point. You've been doing your work. If you haven't, I always say, if you haven't been doing the work, you are in a space right now where you know what you need to be doing next. You've had an example come up as of late that has changed your vision in how you see things. You've had something that just came up as of recent that has changed your vision on how you see things. How you're going to use this energy is told us in the King of Wands. King of Wands represents is taking that lead within your inner truth. Maybe you just came into a position where you just came through an argument and you just saw something. You had an argument with a boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, whatever it may be, friends, family members at the job, whatever, and you're seeing it for exactly what it is. Maybe you had a moment where something directly reflected to you and you were like, is that me? Is that me? Is that my inner child in direct prerequisite looking at me right now? The King of Wands represents taking the lead within that position of yourself and doing what you're supposed to be doing. That means if you've been slacking in your pimping, slacking in your studies, slacking in your inner work, child work, slacking in the work with yourself, then guess what? It's time to get back on it. This time is all about the aspects of the consistency. That's told us by the Three of Pentacles. This is where consistency based on your works. We get stuck in these aspects of the attachment based on the words, and then we find ourselves anchoring ourselves to the old aspects of ourselves. That Queen of Swords has cut that anchor and gave you clear vision of what you need to be doing. That King of Wands aspect that's illustrating that story of now it's time for you to stand forward in your energy moving forward. That leads us into that Three of Pentacles. The Three of Pentacles represents the aspects of the works that you're doing, and the works that you're doing are not to maintain the original status quo. It is not to mean to keep you the same, keep doing the same things. It's time for you to get humble with yourself. You've been doing what you've been doing lately, and adds up to this point, is you've been working on maintaining the survival narrative. You have been working to keep the maintain of the survival narrative. And now you're repeating this survival narrative in your works. What's happening in your space so you can stay with it. I always tell people, when you're staying within that narrative based on the survival narrative, your works, that predestination is leading everything back to repeat that same point. This goes into, I'll use this as an example. If every day I go to work and I do the same things every week, I remember going to work every single day of the week. And Mondays, that was my day of, we had a truck on Mondays. So Mondays I get there early, knock out the truck, go online, detail the grill, knock out the fryers before the truck got there, knock out the fryers. I do all this detail work. That way by Tuesday, which was I work Mondays and Tuesdays, so Tuesday I came in, did my next line of detail work. Wednesday was my off day. Come back on a Thursday. I'm looking around like nobody else did anything. It's time for you to stop putting in this work to maintain the same point. It's time for you to allow those things, that new crystal clear vision, and what are you going to do with it? That leads into the aspects of that rebirth, that death card. The death card represents the ending and the transition. You are in that transition period. It is the end, whether you like it or not, for the ways that you used to be. It's the end, whether you like it or not. The old way you used to adjust to things, the old way you used to move through things and keep yourself going. In this aspect of you loving yourself, but you really aren't loving yourself. You trust yourself, but there's an underlying distrust. You still attached. You still trying to make things be what you need them to be so you can stay in that space. It's over with. It's over with. Done. Over. Finito. Nada más. You gotta let that shit go. This new clear, crystal clear vision is gonna have you standing in the knowledge of what you know you need to do. It's gonna help you with those works to help you ease through that transition. Coming to that rebirth for yourself. And after that, that page of wand represents new opportunities. Until you allow that vision to put you in that leading yourself to leading into the authenticity of yourself, the works that you will do will keep you cycling back and over and over again through that reincarnation that I've talked about before, and you'll never get the new opportunity. The page of wands represents the new energy and the new opportunity. You want all that new stuff that you want. Remember, I told you before, this year every year has been your year, because it's only been 1 year, 1 day, 1 month, 1 hour, 1 minute, and that's all been for you. It's gonna lead back to that shadow work. That dream relationship that you want, that's gonna help you flourish and make everything around you fit in that aspect of that true love. Shadow work. That job that you want, that's gonna be the dream that's gonna help you get to exceed the expectations that you set for yourself based on the old precondition. Shadow work. The vehicle that is going to drive you to that house of what you want to establish, that house that you established on that new foundation. Shadow work. It's all gonna be in the shadow work. Clarity, leadership, works, transition to the new opportunity. This has been your weekly reading. If you're interested in a reading, stay tuned for the plug talk to get the information in that. After this message, we about to get into this section. Welcome to the God Hour Podcast. Ashe.
You feel like you got a voice, feel like you got something to say? Feel like you have something that can move the masses or get everybody tuned in and you want a bigger audience? Whether it can be anything from something like the God Hour or anything from like sports, news, fashion week, whatever it may be. Let me put you on to something. The easiest way to do it is with the Anchor app. Biggest thing about it is free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will even do all of the distribution for your podcast for you, so it can be heard on many other platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money. You also can make money from your podcast with a minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. It's everything you need to get your voice heard and get what you feel that's in your heart and enter to your heart out to the masses. If you're interested, download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started.
Welcome. It's your host, Papa Lucifer, your psychologist. Welcome to the God Hour Podcast. That was I love when the reading it speaks to me on that level when I do an energy reading, because I'm just reading that space, putting in that space, and like the cards came out, the spirit said drop. The spirit, my grandmother came through. That was a reading done by my grandmother. Grandmother came through. She was like, all right, cool, talking about this, and this. Point them out like that. But welcome to the God Hour Podcast on this beautiful today being the only day that matters. I'm going to tell y'all something funny. I was at the store yesterday doing my shopping thing after I leave the gym, doing my usual shopping, pick up my water and my supplements, whatever. It's time to pick them up. And somebody it's a holiday today. It was like an older white lady sitting behind the thing. And I'm looking at her, she's looking at me, and I can tell she's like scared to ask because she really didn't know. I'm gonna put it like this. Sunday night, I didn't put two and two together when it said it was a bank holiday. And then they were like, it's MLK's birthday. I was like, oh well. So when I got there, she was like, yes, MLK's birthday. I was like, oh, wow. I should have. And then she looked at me like, oh my God, did I offend him? I was like, I didn't know until I didn't think about it to this just this Sunday night. So there's nothing on you. But I said that to talk about the aspects of within those words of attachment, that aspect of anchoring. When we come into this space based on this anchoring narrative, attaching to the old definitions and some of the symptoms of it is like that PTSD and Stockholm Syndrome. Old definitions, old words, like I'm gonna ask a couple questions. What does mom mean to you? What does dad mean to you? What does sister mean to you? What does family mean to you? What are the definitions? When you think about these words, outside of the definition, if you use strictly the definition, are the individuals that hold those titles in your life that narrative? Do they fit that definition? That's the anchoring factor. I remember I thought about it on my walk a little earlier. I thought about it on my walk. I always do a walk before I come in and do recording. And I was thinking to myself, and so some people that sound cold, I was like, if my mother were to transition today, I wouldn't feel the way everybody would expect me to feel. Like I'd show up, I go to the funeral. I go to the funeral, probably meet him in the graveyard, in the cemetery. I show up probably in all white. I have some white I get her some white roses, some white lilies. Tie some lavender in there. A couple of her favorite flowers and scents. I bound the bouquet. Probably with a spell to help her transition on so she can get through. Set her up in one of the houses that I've built within that space so she can do her work up there and she ain't got to worry about coming back in. I wouldn't have the feelings that most people would have. And there's some people that have like, nigga, that sounds heartless as fuck. But it's like, she transitioned. I have compassion, always going to love my mother, and I'm going to do what I can do. This is when we think about this anchoring process. We don't allow, until you understand it, you're always going to need it. When we come into this, when you're in your space, when you're doing your work, your internal work, the triggers are attached to those very anchors within us that make us feel this longing or needing for something. And sometimes we create a relationship with something that's never really been there. I know guys, and I know girls that I know guys, and I know men and women. I know kings and queens that their mother did them the dirtiest. Their mother was on drugs. Their pops was on drugs. Their father wasn't there. And they still love them. And for a while, I always wondered, how could you love somebody that did you so dirty? Like, did you so wrong? And they were like, the only thing they could tell me was, they brought me into the world. Without them, and even if they're not even realizing that they're saying it, this is that space of understanding that spirit. Even if they didn't realize what they were saying when they said it, it was something for me to take in, like, because that's my mother. Now, regardless of how they feel, expounding upon it, going into that depth, just by them saying that's their simple, this is your key of understanding without a bias. Because I remember having those conversations before about people with their mothers, their parents, their family. And I'd be like, I wish I could, man. Like, my mom did me so dirty, or this happened to me, and I go down this long list of negatives. I go down this long list of negative definitions, and eventually they be like, well, yeah, but it's still your mother. Like, at the end they all say your mother. I remember having them same conversations with certain people, and they be like, yeah, family will do you dirty, family will do you wrong, family will do you this. And I remember like connecting to that, even though I never said it. Even though I never said those words, I did not agree. I did not put myself in a position to disagree with it. Even though my silence was my agreement to what they were saying. This is the space of the anchoring. When you're anchoring yourself to an emotional and old aspect of yourself, everything that you're gonna do is going to be dependent upon this anchor. This is the people like, your mother was not the mother that you wanted to be. Your mother kept your father out your life, or your mother cared about money more than these other aspects, or things of this nature. You're anchored to that energy. So now you go forward thinking this correspondence. You'll go forward thinking that you'll think the exact same way as your mother based on the aspects of the anchor. For you not wanting to be like your mother, you'll do everything in your power within your space to not be like your mother. But I remember being like I remember being like my mother. My mother was passive aggressive. My mother's still passive aggressive. My mother used a sob story in a heartbeat to make people feel sorry for her and run with it. Manipulative that core. I remember doing this, even though I said, I never could be like I hate my mother. But I kept acting out that same anchor. I was being in the spaces, being up. I would get super mad at work or super happy, whatever it may be. Be that way in relationships. I would be acting out the aspects of my mother. It wasn't until I really started doing that inner work, when I started tracking the aspects of my relationships, they were all with different aspects of my mother. From my first fiance was the equivalent to my mother turned inside out. She was the higher level of passive aggressive. She was manipulative. She was isolating. And I'm like, why does this keep happening? Second, the relationship after that, like, it was the same narrative. Passive aggressive, emotional, isolating. And then if they weren't that, then I was that. Then I found myself being the isolator. I found myself being the emotional one. So like, you keep going back and forth, switching between these aspects because you still attached to that anchor. So you feel like you going forward. You can do everything else in your life. You can get the good job. You can have a decent job. You can have the decent crib. You can have all of these aspects. But because you're anchored to that old process of thought, that old narrative, everything is always going to feed this anchor. You're always going to be anchored to something. You're always going to be in that state of codependency for something. You're always going to be searching for something because you can't move forward. You're trying to bring it towards you. This is when we look at this external environment of ourselves. So when you're looking at your life, like, you'll create these anchors and then based on these old definitions. And then some of the old definitions that we always got stuck with, these words of attachment, as much as you hate your mom or you have a distaste for your mom for what she did, you have to forgive her for yourself. Because that's the only way. You have to be vulnerable with yourself and understanding how you benefited from what she did. Whether she did good or bad, you benefited from what she did. Because you would not be in this existence of the space we're at. Remember, we're going outside of emotion. You would not be in the space you are at right now until you admit that what your mother did put you where you at. Going outside of emotion. Because most people do it based on emotion. You see it when they're hurting, and every time that anger erupts, they're like, yeah, it's because my mother I'm doing stuff like this. Because my mother I'm doing stuff like this. My mother kept me away from my dad, and my mother kept me away from my dad, and if I was around my dad, then my life would have been better because I would have stayed with my dad. And then what if you meet your dad? And then you see that the reason that your mother did what she did was because of your mother's lack of accountability and responsibility was feeding the space where your father had a lack of accountability and responsibility. You see how that works? You see how that comes into that space? This goes out to the aspects of you anchoring to this old thought process for yourself. Stuck within that thought process, stuck within that action, and you just keep repeating the same narratives. I remember having as much as I said, man, I don't really fuck with my moms. At the end of the day, in admission, if I needed a place to stay, I could still go to my mother's crib. Because it was everything else I did around that to maintain that space with my mother. Even if it was guilt based on my mother's part, every time if I had to go back to my mother's crib or go back to my folks' crib, to their house, I was always in a position to where I could get groceries, get groceries, give my mother some money, all of these aspects. I was always able to do that. It was more like a business-minded relationship of being there for that period of time. Always in the aspect of being respectful in that space. Even though the first couple of times, like when I did it, and this is admittedly, the first couple times that I did it, since I didn't have a respect for myself, I didn't have a respect for the space. I was stuck in this mentality. I'm grown, I can leave. Not even realizing that the reason I was thinking that way was based on what I heard even in that space right there. When you grown and you pay your way, then you can do this, and this. When you get a job, you can do this, and this. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, I got a job. And then you come up with all these type of anchoring excuses for not taking care of your business. I remember being at my mother's house, coming to my mom's house late. I just got off work. I would use the excuse I just got off work, or I just got off work, and I really be getting off work. The first couple of times it'd be like, people want to go places, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go. All to maintain this external image that I was in a space that I wasn't. My internal or my home didn't match my external. The anchor that I was tethered to was giving me just enough leash to do what I said I was going to do. So I noticed this when you were stuck in this anchoring program, this anchored format, that little chain that you put on there is only set for you to do a certain amount of things. This is why most of us don't expire. This is why most of us can't expire into a state of ownership or gravitating towards the true aspects of that authentic self, due to the factor that we still got some stuff left in there. We can't take in the information and build those consistencies because we still have something that we're attached to. That buzzword, that trigger. that trigger warning. But I'm here to tell you, them triggers, they're needed. Y'all gonna hear like more and more when I start, did I trigger you? Because those triggers are needed. It helps you to be able to map out the space of what you need to be working on within that space. If there was no triggers or you avoid all the triggers, like if my living room was full of landmines and I knew the map for the landmines, cool. So it's cool. I can avoid all the landmines. But eventually, I mean, what does that mean for everybody else to come into space? Now nothing else can come into this space because of those landmines, because of these triggers. Nothing else can, I can't expound and go into the deeper aspects of my inner truth because the space can't be filled because it's preset. There's a precondition within the space for me to have to do what I'm doing in there. This causes that Ptsd type syndrome. Even though you haven't been going through even though you haven't been in that home, even though you probably ain't been in your mom's house for like 15 years, those scars are still there. And we know what PTSD is like. When you coming back from overseas from a war, and veterans, they got their whole hand blown off. All they got is a wrist, but it's like the last motion of their hand is stuck. Even though the hand's not there, their hand is still clenched. That nerve is still pinched because they can't let go of that image. That trigger is still there. They have not dealt with that trigger. There's an episode of House when I think it's like season 7 or 8. I think it's like mid season 7 or late early season 8. And him and Wilson's neighbor, upstairs neighbor, he had that syndrome. And like he put his hand in a box, closed the box and put his hand in there. He said, put both hands in there. And he had the mirror showing him his other hand. So he said, now release. And through the mirror process, he released. And then he released the nerve. That's that mirror work. Get into your shadow. That's the only way that you're going to heal from the old anchors. When we use these old anchors, all we do is keep repeating these old paradoxes within ourselves. We keep fucking ourselves over. And then we blame it on the aspects of the world. Yeah, man, if I didn't have to go through this, and this, or this and this didn't go happen to me, then, man, fuck it. I was there. I was there a lot of the times in my life. I was there a lot of those times in my life. Like, a lot. Holding on to old narratives and old thought processes. Allowing these old buzzwords to keep me under this control. So no matter how far I got, I was still under the same thought process. No matter how far I got within myself or got within my studies or got within my job or got within relationships or got within, it was always the same pattern. Since I was anchored to that trauma that was long ago repressed under everything that's on that cord, I could not go forward. I couldn't explore, go deeper because I couldn't let go of the anchor. I always had the same excuse. A lot of us had that same damn excuse. Man, I don't open up to people, man, because every time you open up to a chick, they use it against you. Who's the first person that used your emotions against you? Cold pressed juice. Who was the first person that used your emotions against you? Who is the first person to lie to you, steal to you, commit these treasons and betrayals to you? Who was the first person that did it? And then ask yourself, once you go through your process, where did they learn it from? Now, where they learned it from and them doing it doesn't matter. What truly matters in the inner truth is you're acquiring the knowledge and the acceptance to not do it, to stop it with you. It ran in the family till it met you. There's a lot of things that ran in my families, rammed in the intertwined in my families that stopped with me. I remember one of my first God Thought lives when I did like an extended live on a Facebook. It's on my YouTube channel, where I did Generations of Us, the Generation Us, the generational curses. And I talked about the aspects of my uncles being alcoholics. And I remember one day in particular, my mom got in an argument, I think. My mom and pops got in an argument. It's been a while. Like I was grown at this point in time. And I remember I was at my mother and pop's house, and my uncle came through, mad drunk, feeling belligerent, and he basically tried to attack my pops. And I remember defending my pops. Like, my pops wasn't in the wrong or anything, none of that nature. Like, I defended my pops. And I remember the feelings that came back after that. I remember my pops looking me in my face at that point in time. And that was one of the first real times I saw my pops actually cry. Like, my pops legit, there were real genuine tears coming from his eyes. Because my pops had that moment where he really felt my pops was holding on to this narrative in himself that he never was defended. His pops never really defended him. He was holding on to this old imagery of my grandfather for the good years, trying to make it up to him, trying to be that good narrative of a son. And then right there in that moment, after going back to it, it was unlocked so I could go back to it. This is the key when you unlock these underlines. Since I unlocked that aspect of that, where that anchor, that tether was, I popped that cord and I was in there, I could go back and I was like, the same way that I tried to be everything it was to be the best son to my father, to my pops, was the same way that they were. The same way my pops was trying to be the best son ever. The anger that he had in him from when my grandfather transitioned, it wasn't based on it wasn't based on a missing. It was based on that thought process of he never got to hear his pops say to him that he was proud. To hear his pops say to him, you did a good job. These were those narratives that he was holding on to. And since he never had a chance to clear that out for himself, that's his repeat. That's his repeat narrative. That's the repeat, being within that Stockholm Syndrome, being within this PTSD. These layers go deeper than these layers go deeper than just, oh, my dad was on drugs and my mom was out, whatever the fuck it may be. There's deeper, just like there's deeply rooted shit within you that led from that original trauma and that anchor. That's what's happening to you. Until you deal with yours, you can't clear that space because that energy now has something to feed from in the current state. That existence. As long as you are anchored to the old aspect, that in trauma, that narrative, it doesn't matter how far you go forward because it always has something to feed on to maintain the projection within its existence. To stay within that light, to stay in that dark, it ain't gotta come out because you're the light that is giving it you're the light that's giving it its shape. You're the light giving it its shape. You are creating that you're creating that You're creating its flow. You're creating the aspects for it. And then raising, this is when I talked about the aspects of raising everything from yourself, because you're still raising yourself, because you're still in the childlike mindset. So you're not only raising yourself in survival, if you have children, you're raising them in survival. You got nieces and nephews, you're raising them in survival. Everything around you, you're raising in survival. Even to your friends, you're raising them up in survival. Family members, you raising them up in survival. The reason that you connect, and most of the people that are around you right now, is because they were raised based on survival. And you get to see the different parameters and depths of survival with each individual. I remember having a friend that always lied, but he was like the most spoiled kid ever. He was actually a spoiled, sheltered kid. But he wanted to be so hood. He wanted to be in the streets so bad. He wanted to be in the streets so bad that he made up this entirely different projection that didn't set right, because the genuine individuals that were around us or around me, we all came from an aspect of the street aspect. I started noticing that my genuine or my authentic projection being anchored to that lifestyle, with that's why I was connecting to certain individuals that were too big. They weren't really deep into it, because I wasn't deep into it, but I was still connected to those old anchors. That's even to the aspect when my pops transitioned. I was still holding on to certain aspects. So it kept playing out in my life. Those become your signs within your space. That helps you understand this aspect of that anchoring process. And since you're anchoring to everything based on the old narrative, based on the old plight, you're still anchored to something. Guess what you're doomed to live in? The predestination syndrome. And that's what we're about to get into next. Thank you for choosing the God Hour. Y'all all right out there? Yep. Welcome back. I had to get my little sip of water in real quick. But I'm going to give y'all something to think about on the metaphysical manifestation to give you the science to go with it. The next time you hit up Google or you go study something, study maritime law. This entire, if you want to call it a government, whatever you want to call it, is based on maritime law. It's based on maritime law. Look up maritime law. Once you understand that, you take that little bit of information in, you'll understand why they try to keep you anchored to everything and keep you on this the predestination complex. Predestination syndrome is the casual loop. Simple layman's terms, until history is understood, history repeats itself. That means until you understand the pattern will always repeat. Until you deal with the things that are happening within the pattern shall always repeat. Whether the words, the actions, or the place. Something as simple as plain as, if you were, let's say your mother was, no, let's say your mom's was, my mom's was 24 when she had her first kid. My mom was 24 when she had me. My sister, my oldest twin sister, she was, I want to say about 24 when she had her first boy. She was about 20. No. Yeah, she was 24 when she had her first kid. My sister was actually, I want to say 24 when she had her first child. and they were twins. They had them like right behind each other. That's the precondition. This entire space has been built upon preconditions. I want you to understand the aspects of that precondition or that casual loop. Until you deal with what you need to deal with, the loop shall continue based on the energy or creating conduits within that function, within one of those layers. So if something happened to you when you was 12, 13, that changed your life forever, and you got a kid that's 12, 13, around that age, where something happened at that point in time, something dramatic is going to change. There's going to be, that's where that first fork in the road is going to be, for where either you're going to continue going down the same path and then they're going to follow, or you going to implement what you've learned up to a certain point to switch that route. The key to switching that route is not going to be based on the bias. It's not going to be based on bias. What happens to a lot of us, simply just because of that because of that theorem of that I was grown. You'll understand when you grown, I'm the parent. Think about how many, if you really think about how many times you said that. Just really think about it. If you have children, how many times have you said it? I'm the parent. I'm grown. How many times have you said it? Now ask yourself, go back in the day, even if it wasn't said in those exact words, what energy was given off from the parental figures that were in your life that gave you that same exact fucking quote? That's where you got the quote from. Because I'm grown. This is what happens when you get grown. That creates the corresponding and the complex for that individual to do that same thing as wait for that same aspect. When we think about children in a lot of spaces, when we think about children, we automatically think that they're not old enough to understand something. Here is the truth into the matter of this. When I studied that, when I did child psychology, they actually, if they're able to absorb it, they're able to understand it. It's you that now has been built with these external filters that cannot absorb it. Therefore, you don't understand it. So naturally inside of your space, you're going to sit there and be like, they're not going to understand this. The last time I was talking to both my nieces, I talked to them like an adult. That means I used adult, like I talked to them like they were an adult. Like I can carry a conversation with my niece about her day, and she'll talk to me about her day, her school day, like it's her work, like she was at work. Well, let me tell you what happened. I remember my niece was like about 5 when she that. Let me tell you what happened after my nap. And like we have this whole conversation. And I remember my mom would be sitting over there, my sister be looking at me like I'm having a conversation with my little niece. And like, why you? That's why she thinks she grown. Like, no, I don't treat her any different than I treat anybody else. She has the understanding. My sister's mom looked at me like she ain't old enough to understand that yet. My mother was still pushing that old narrative. My sister was still stuck within that old anchoring of a narrative. So it put her into a space to where she was trying to prove to my mother, this is internal work. This is a therapy session. She was trying to prove to my mother that she do understand and she is an adult. But here becomes that problem. Since the relationship between my mother and my sister, or my mother and my sister, was based on a preconditioned friendship narrative. My mother would use that aspect, that manipulative tone into that space. So it was based on that. She was afraid to lose them for her own lack of self-worth within herself. Her own lack of love within inside of herself. When she went into that space, that's what my sister was reacting in. And then I can go to myself. I remember reacting in that, since I had a lack of self-worth for myself, or the value in myself, the emotional aspect in myself, I was naturally going into these spaces under that predisposition. So I'll repeat the same complexes. And then the trigger, this is the trigger or the for this case would be if my mother met one of my girlfriends. I've only had 8, but that's besides the point. It's neither here nor there. Only had 8, neither here nor there. When my mother would meet one of my girlfriends, it was either she didn't like them or she would use them to get to me. My mother would use the manipulation route. She would ask them the question. She would ask them the same questions about their mothers and relationships with their mothers. And since I didn't have a relationship with my mother, my mother was basically unconsciously my pimp. Based on the emotional imbalance, basically. So I didn't have a relationship with my mother. So the relationship I was having with in the relationships, they were like aspects of the mother type. So they would connect to my mother based on them not having relationships with their mother either. Or their relationships were strained into that narrative. Karmic relationship, karmic debt, clearing out karmic debt, until I met a chick that was actually had a very great relationship with her mother. An excellent relationship with her mother. And her relationship was based with her mother based on the lack of the relationship with her father. So when she met me, I was the father archetype. She never had a chance to meet her father, but she had a great relationship with her mother. She had a great relationship with her she grew her relationship with her stepfather. That was the healing process. But it wasn't until I was able to unlock that trend, or like, you know what, I keep doing this for a reason. I remember when it came to the aspects of I needed to be studying, that I had a string when I was in probably 2 or 3 of my relationships. They were in college. They were college girls. Why the heck do I keep attracting college girls? Nigga, you supposed to be studying. Until you understand the pattern, you will only repeat it. Remember last week we talked about that full circle and that spiral effect. Tonight right now we talking about that casual loop. I kept going into this same loop process. They were either in school, they either had a kid, they had these aspects, they had something for me to be able to insert myself into that space. Whether I was unconsciously doing it, I still found myself in the same loops. Trying to be something in that space that I was lacking. So I would try to be the quintessential parent. I would try to be the quintessential the father of the year, and do all of these things. But I was doing it based on the narrative of attachment. Because I believe that in my mind, it was like, it's not a lie, but it's not untrue, but it's just how you use it. And it's based on the aspects of the depth within yourself. Or unless you're going to keep repeating the same shit. I dated one Aquarius. Sound like we jumping, but we getting in the loop. I dated one Aquarius. And if anybody's familiar, there's truth behind, there's difference between the January Aquarius and the February Aquarius. But it's not like a predetermined narrative. It's like, if you were born in January, I would be considered a February Aquarius. Just to use this, I'm using that as an example. I am the more intellectual aspect. I'm the more rebellious aspect. I'm the more challenging of authority aspect. Both Aquariuses are both into this space. But at a point in time, an Aquarius transitions based on their North Node. This is how you understand this. Transition based on your North Node from your South Node aspects. See, I'm a South Node. My South Node is Sagittarius. So the South Node of Sagittarius is based in, it's sustaining thoughts, sustaining ideals within a certain space, sustaining a certain mind frame, staying true to beliefs, staying within that narrative. So intellectually keeping that narrative. Now my North Node is Gemini. So now I had to split myself to understand the aspects of what I used to be rigid in, to explore and now become rebellious against the old aspects of myself to understand the higher aspects of myself. That's the aspects of the twin. One being introvert, one being extrovert. I had to become the extrovert when it came to the information I was learning and become open. And I had to become the introvert to the old narratives of myself. Until I understood that pattern, I kept repeating it over and over and over again. If I remove all of the emotional constraints from every relationship that I was in, every relationship taught me something. Every relationship had patterns that I had to look at. Really looking, this is really, you really take this look back at yourself. Really look back at your life. Really look back at your life. Look at the things that, because you're still stuck to certain anchors, or you need to learn something in this life, you'll gain an anchor. Some people gain the anchors of kids. I've told this story in the last week's lecture. I had kids in my first 3 lives. This is my last cycle here. I had kids in my first 3 lives. I had 2 sons in my first life, and we were elves. We were in the fairy realm. My second life, I was a priest. And I was in the Gnostic priesthood. And I ended up, before I joined the Gnostic priesthood, I had a son and a daughter. So they never really got to know me. And then it wasn't them not getting to know me, it was their signs that I had to remember. And in my last life, I had, first life I had 2 sons. The second life I had a son and a daughter. And the last life, I want to say I had 2 daughters. Yeah, I had 2 daughters. I had 1 daughter. But it was the aspects of their signs that stuck out to me. Like my first cycle through, my son was my oldest son was my rising. My son in my second son in my first life, he was my Cancer. Not Cancer, he was my moon. He was my Leo. He was my Leo moon aspect. My moon sign now. My South Node was my South Node was my daughter, and my North Node was my son in my second life. And then the twins, they were the Gemini with my North Node. They were twins. This is how you start. When you going back in your Akashic records, you're supposed to pick. This is the information that's locked behind all of the repressed aspects. So when people want to I want to get into my Akashic records, you got to do the shadow work first. Because I can take you all the way back there. But it's just going to be more work in the present tense. Therefore, you got to take those steps to get back there. Sometimes you might have to go back there and unlock certain things to get more clarity. Other times you got to do work before you even get back there. That's one of the biggest things I tell a lot of my clients. Don't rush the process. One of the biggest things that I tell a lot of my clients is we're not going to rush this process. Because if we rush this process, you're going to end up being in a position where you're not where you're wanting to be. I'll put it that way. you're not going to be where you want to be. You're not going to be where you want to be. You're not going to be happy. A whole bunch of other stuff like that to that narrative. You ain't going to be happy. You're not going to be happy. Trust me. But when we go into this predisposition or that predetermined destination aspect, that's what we're talking about. When we get into this predestination aspect, everything's set down here based on a predestination. You're supposed to wake up at around 5. You're supposed to go to school, K through 12. You might do some college. If you don't do no college, then you're going to start in the workforce, and you work till you're about 65. And then they got everybody thinking in their narrative, like, I've heard everything from, you need to have your kids early. So I started having my kids when I was like 21, 22. Where after 21, after I had my partying, I settled down and I had my kids. Okay. Where did you get that anchor from? I don't want to have my kids when I get super older. I don't want to have my kids when I get in my 30s. That's too late. I don't want to be the old grandmother. I want to get them out the house early. I've heard women say this. I want to get the kids out the house early. I want to get the kids out the house by 40. That way the last kid leaving around 40, and I still can enjoy my golden years. I'm like, what? That precondition, that predestination will leave you fucked up. Because you're going to spend your entire time, remember you anchor to a trauma already. So now you got a predestination in mind. That predestination is going to be anchored by the trauma. So you're going to try to do everything in your predestination. And I had a young lady one time in a lecture say, "Oh my God, that's true." Cause I tried to, like, my mom left my dad. And then I spent my entire life trying to, like, prove that she said niggas weren't shit. So I had to prove to her that niggas, like, I was in every relationship trying to prove to my mom that I can make these niggas worth something. I spent so much time trying to give them this external worth that I never gave myself any worth in return. I lost myself in that narrative. I lost myself in the predestination syndrome. That shit will hurt you. You can't renew your soul. You cannot integrate the aspects, the pieces of your soul and bring them together so you can start renewing yourself until you remove that predestination complex. I'm 35. I don't look any day over 27. When I started I remember my 31st birthday. I looked like I was damn near fucking 40. I looked at the picture the other day. I looked 40 years old. When I started doing my healing work, and that was like, for a little bit switching to vegetarian, now I'm plant-based. I just love plant-based because it gives me a room to create anything that I want. When I started doing my healing work, I noticed for every, I'll say about, to give it an equivalent, I say for about every year that I tackled in my healing process, for every year worth of information that I synthesized and quantified into my healing process, it took a month off of my life. It took a month off of my physical age. I started going backwards. That Benjamin Button. I've been in this space for now, I'll say 5 years ago, 6, 7. It's been about 8 years of the 8 years of the healing and building it and being in this space. Been about that 8-year period. So if you take off a year for every month, shit was falling off. Sometimes 2 things at a time. And like going through that process, really focusing on that hermit stage and being in my work and working on myself. Now I wake up and I'm like, nigga, I look 27. So the excuse, that predestination or that anchor of like, I lived a bad life. I lived a stressed life. I was like, oh. Statute of limitations. I'm not going to say these things, but so how'd you live a stressed life? You didn't live a stressed life. It's the fact that you're stuck within the anchoring of the old existence. That light starts to dim. You don't know how to charge yourself, so you can't renew. You can't do a soul renewal. You can't renew your soul. I know people that are like 37, 38, 39, 40, and they still look 12, 13, 18, 16, because they found that key in that healing process. Being stuck in that predestination, you'll always worry about time. You'll always think you don't have enough time. Staying in that predestination syndrome, the symptoms are lack of time, feeling like you're running out of time, feeling like you never get enough rest, because the aspects within you in that masculine, that masculine aspect we talked about before, you always feel like you got to be doing something. You always got to feel like you involved somewhere. That feminine aspect of nurturing and keeping everything and everybody else in balance, all based on that predetermination notion. Down to you feeling like at this age I'm supposed to be married, and this age I'm supposed to be this. When you dependent on the external that predestination syndrome, that narrative, you lack and you skip steps. You will skip doing the work. I know I did that shit. I remember I literally was like, yo, at 35, I'm going to be retired. Spoke that into existence. And I spoke this back when I was 27. Spoke this back when I was 27. Actually, which is crazy. I spoke that when I was 27. One of my strong numbers. 27. I'm at the age of 35 and I'm not working for anybody but myself. I'm dedicated to my studies, in teaching, in counseling, in coaching, in these aspects at 35. But since I'm in the mindset of 20, since I'm in the renewed soul sense of 27, I just took it back to the loop. So now I'm in the space, in the inner, my energy is even higher than that. My energy is damn like a 16, 17-year-old. But I'm in the space of the 27, looking at the 35. I'm at the space of 27, looking at the 35. I'll be 36 this year. 3 plus 6 is 9. That's the end of a cycle. 2 plus 7 is what? 9. That's the end of a cycle. I have broken the cycle. This is the depth of when you breaking a generational curse. Breaking those generational preconditions. I am in the power number of 9, 27, the ether, and I'm about to be 36 this year. That's 30. That's 3 plus 6 is 9. I'm in the end of a cycle. The end of a cycle. I'm stuck with, I'm outside of the realm of the cycle. I'm in full ether and I can see it. I'm in that quantum thought. I'm in that ultra instinct that we don't get into on Friday. But that's the space that I'm in now. I know of somebody that is 37, 38, 39, 40, and they damn near look 60. These people look old as shit because they stuck within they're stuck within that predestination complex. You can hear they're in the predestination complex because when you're stuck within the predestination complex, you're always going to give individuals things that you have not yet worked on for yourself. Every time I give out information, it's something that I've already done and I've pretty much mastered. I do not give out information unless I've mastered it to the point to be able to teach it. I will not give out any information unless I've mastered it to a point of teaching it. Becoming the student once again. Remember, breaking the cycle, becoming the student once again. The master is the teacher, the master is the student is the master. So whenever I teach something, now I'm in the cycle of when I've done the underlining work to this to break the cycle and know that this is going to break a cycle. This is one of the major keys in your healing work. When you're doing your healing, you want to break these cycles. Everybody talks about this break generational curses. Papa Lucifer in that space is going to give you the breakdown of breaking down those, understanding those aspects of those numbers, those cycles, and getting really deep into those aspects of breaking those cycles, breaking those chains, breaking those numbers, breaking yourself down. Like, for example, if you about to be 35 this year, you in the age of alchemy. You're in the cycle of 8. That's the 8. That's that alchemy. You're in the alchemy. You're in the infinite space. You're in the infinite space. In this space and time for you, just because, like, you already know the predisposition. You already know you're about to be 35. So you can start using that energy now. That's a whole nother key when you're coming into your space. But after this break, we're going to get into that when we get into this aspect of Phantom Nemesis. Here on the God Hour podcast. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, meow, meow. Welcome back to the God Hour podcast. Here on This Is Not State Run Radio. Taking it from the big homie. This ain't State Run Radio. We do what the fuck we run over here. But yeah, taking yourself into this complex for yourself. One of the most important factors in you becoming and you moving into yourself and you doing this, being this individual, moving inside this space, becoming ultimately better, is really based on, and reality for yourself is really going to be based on the difference between the person that you are and the person that you're becoming is this phantom nemesis. This is another aspect of the shadow. The phantom nemesis. I remember having a phantom nemesis. A lot of us don't even realize that we had a phantom nemesis. The phantom nemesis is everything you strive to be, not dealing with the trauma. Your phantom nemesis is everything you are going to strive to be without dealing with said trauma. That family, that job, that car, all of these things that you want are going to be property of the phantom nemesis. Because you'll never be happy enough once you get it. You'll always be fighting to try to keep it and survive to try to keep it. And you'll do everything within the space of the environment to sustain what you're getting. One of the biggest things with that is when people are always talking about, yo, I hustle because a hustler can lose it and get it back. That is a predestination quote. I've accepted that as a predestination quote. That predestination complex. Because you will always create that nemesis, the phantom nemesis. You always create a nemesis based on the anchor, based on that position. It'll always be streaming through that aspect of the energy. This is that cycle. So if you wanted to picture a rotation around the globe, a rotation around the sun, that is that path that is going to follow. It can't stray from this path. It can't stray from this path. Even when you look at the Earth's orbit, everything is an example of you. So if you look at the Earth's orbit and it keeps repeating the same cycles, and it's stuck within that cycle, it's stuck within this cycle of attachment because it can't move from there because there's a predetermined, a preconditioned thought process and shit mapped out for it. So it has to do this cycle because it's inherently flawed and destined to do this. Based on the lower aspect, not knowing that it's a prison planet keeps it going. You wanting something to strive here outside of you doing your work. You're noticing right now that it's not working. You notice that every time you seem to move ahead, new things pop up. Supposed to. Every time you deal with the layer, the next round of tests come. So we'll use it like this. You come into this space, you say you're a god, you're a goddess. Okay, cool. You're a god and a goddess. If we look at Dragon Ball Z or look at any of these young ass look at an anime, I'll use Dragon Ball Z for that example. We'll use the what was it? When Universe 7 won, the universe is the champion. Yeah, that one. When Goku used Ultra Instinct, I can't even. That shit just left my mind. But you looked at them; they're always in a childlike position because the God is the child. The God is the inner child. You are the phantom nemesis of your inner child. You are the shadow of your inner child. Everything that you're doing right now, based on those traumas that you're going through, is based on the wounds of the inner child. Your inner child being wounded by over and over and over again, cut up, sliced the fuck down by the phantom nemesis, which is yourself. The precondition. You stuck within a state of preconditions and presets that you really ain't going nowhere. You stuck within a vast array of this. Those old biases keep popping up. The distrust, the distaste, the distrust, because all you're doing when you're still, remember that anchoring process, you still stuck, since you're still anchored to something in your past, you can't really be set free. You stuck to that little leash. You stuck within that predestination complex. So all you're doing is moving around the character. All you're doing is moving around the attributes of the characters. So I'll use this as an example. When every time I was in a relationship and I was like, I'm gonna work on this relationship with my mother. The attributes that I took away from my mother and understanding were acknowledged within the reflection of whatever relationship I was in. These are the reasons I want to work with, get to know work on this relationship with my mother, because I'm seeing them in this space. I was shifting the attributes to another person. So the attributes were, it's always been you. So I was shifting the attributes from my mother onto this individual in this reflection. So I didn't accept that there were parts of me. So I kept repeating this same process, wondering why I wasn't getting nowhere. Every relationship, I boiled it down to their zodiac sign, to all these external issues and dramas, but in reality, it was always me. I was just simply moving around the attributes of myself that I didn't want to deal with. I was putting them off on somebody else. It was their fault. It was this. That's like if a chick go around like, it isn't her fault. It's that nigga fault because he ain't shit. Or old buddy would be like, it ain't your fault, bro. It's them chicks, man. You know, these chicks ain't loyal. All they do is about one thing. So y'all both just moving around aspects to different other people and be like, nah, I ain't nothing like that, and that. And then you trying to create a player, not even realize that unconsciously you're just creating another reflection. You're creating another nemesis to the aspects of yourself. Because since you still anchored to the trauma, since you still anchored to that trauma, you still stuck within that cycle, all you're doing is moving it to somewhere else. So now if you get into the most wonderful relationship ever, since you haven't dealt with what you were anchored to, and that anchor, that the thought forms that are holding that tether still need to be fed, the fungus on that damn rope need to be fed, so the rope don't break, you moving on to something else. So now you go from being the bitter girlfriend or the bitter girlfriend, yeah, we say bitter girlfriend, or the bitch nigga boyfriend. Now you got your friend that's now with your friend is either the quintessential broken chick or the broken dude or their man or whatever it may be. You just transferring around the nemesis because you feel you still need an enemy for you to exist. You still feel you need an external enemy to exist. That's mind control. Because remember, whenever you inside of your space, when you look at somebody in the face, when you look at somebody in the eye that is not trained, and you start telling them things about yourself, you're programming everything based on the disposition for them to be actively searching and stimulating anything that hides away from those aspects. You keep giving niggas the keys to your car. You keep giving niggas the keys to your crib. You keep giving your homegirls keys to your crib. And then wondering why they're sleeping with all your men. You keep giving niggas the keys to your car and you keep wondering why they keep bringing your shit back on empty. Because you need a nemesis. You need a reason to be upset. I said this the other week. The reason why those individuals, those people can never save you or give you what you need is because they've gotten used to you giving them what they need. You keep going to give them loans out. You keep loaning your energy out for their karmic debt. And then you wondering why whenever you're in debt, they can't help you. You keep wondering why every time you go out in that space and when now you're in trouble, they can't help you. But it gets worse. If you don't realize that pattern, you'll give them a reason to help you. If you do not know, if you do not identify that pattern, you will give them the reason to help you. You'll give them the reason to help you. That means you trying to escape from something, you trying to escape from real work, you'll give them the reason to give you an escape. It'll come out and synthesize in the form of party, event, wherever it may be. If you don't want to deal with your underlining issues in your nemesis, you will feed their nemesis. You'll feed them the aspects of you'll feed them the same biases you use to counteract and keep their nemesis thriving. Give you some real shit that I thought, this is some real shit that I had to go through. I noticed that my friends, family members wouldn't leave certain situations because they knew I would always be there. Going deeper, I knew they wouldn't leave them situations because I needed them to be there. I needed them to be in that position, so I had a reason to go over there. I needed my mother to be in the position that she was in because I needed to go over there. I knew exactly where my mother was at. I knew exactly how to get to my mother's house. If I needed to stay the night, if I needed to get some food, if I was hungry, I knew where my mother was at. I didn't catch that thought process until the last time I had to go back to my mother's house. And it was the first time I went there that my sisters weren't there. And my sisters called the house every single day. But the last time I had to go back to the last time I stayed was at my people's house, it was the most different time because I finally mastered everything. The first thing I did when I got over to my mom's house, after this, like 4 years ago when I was basically homeless, I went to my mom's house, and I remember the first thing I did when she had her new house, I went into the room, and everything that was in the drawers was like old. It was just basically trash. There was no clothes. It was all trash. It was every time my sisters came over, they stuffed trash into the drawers because they literally thought that my mom wouldn't clean it up, and that would be something that they can come back and do. So this becomes the duality in the aspect of removing the trash, taking out the trash. You only are going to take out this trash when it's into the benefit to you bringing yourself within balance. I remember going into that room, and I remember bags and bags of trash out of these drawers and organizing these drawers. I didn't even use the drawers. I used like there was like a 6 drawer dresser. I only use like the bottom 2 drawers. And I remember taking everything out of these drawers. And I remember my mom came to the door, she was like, they supposed to come do that. I said, Mom, they never gonna. And the first thing I said to my mother was like, Mom, they ain't never gonna come clean this shit out. Because if they clean it out, they have no reason to come over here. And my mother looked at me with this look on her face like, say that again? I was like, the reason that they leaving the trash here is so they always have a reason to come back here. The reason that people leave trash, that trash ass energy in your life, is so they have a reason to come back. They'll always be attached to you. They leave these trashy ass anchors in your space so they always have a reason to come back. They always have a reason to need you. I remember I had a homeboy that I wasn't really like cool with, but I gave a ride every once in a while. And I started noticing a pattern, like every third time I gave him a ride, he didn't have gas money, but he left like a hat or his apron in my car, or like a hat or his apron in my car. He left his like work shoes in my trunk. And I remember like, I started looking like every 3 days, every 3 rides, this nigga leaves something in my car. So I have to go take it to him. All changed when I went to work early that day. He sent me a text like, damn man, I think I left my shoes in your car again. I was like, well, I'm at work. Your shoes are here and I'm at work. Because also within this space, he could also, because he was used to telling everybody, he was like, man, I think I left my shoes so I can't come to work. And I had dumb managers at this job. And they were like, it would always end up being me like, hey, you want to work? it worked out in my benefit because every time he said it, like, hey, can you stay until old buddy get here with some shoes? I'd be like, yeah, sure. And then it would take forever for him to get there. He would get there super late. He'd be high or drunk or whatever. But I'm about to leave. But this time I was like, he did that phone call. Hit him with the phone call. They were like, yo, can you? I was like, what's wrong? He ain't got his shoes? His shoes are in my trunk. Yeah, I gave him a ride like three days ago. His shoes are in my trunk. So tell him to be here. They called him back. Like, yo, you got 15 minutes to get here. I broke the fucking cycle. I broke the cycle. This is removing these trash aspects out of your life. When it comes to the aspects of your energy, remember, your energy goes into where your energy is going to lie into things that are of the most impact that's undefined. So if you haven't defined your energy, you can tell if you haven't defined your energy because your space becomes undefined. It's undefined. Your space is now undefinable to the higher aspect of yourself, and it's in the mindset of your Nemesis. So if you're trying to become a god, godliness is next to cleanliness, or a goddess, godliness is next to cleanliness, your arch nemesis is going to be filled. Your arch nemesis is not even going to say being dirty. I'm talking about your arch nemesis is going to be cluttered. Your arch nemesis is going to be disarray. Your arch nemesis is always going to be the confusion. So now when you inside, the longer that you're staying within this space of the disarray, the confusion, the more you start manifesting, because now your energy is going into that space and it's creating these factors of the old loop. So now that's why you have the friend that's never getting their life together. You got the family members that's never going to leave. They're never going to leave a certain situation. You got those people that are never leaving, so they're never going to grow up. You got a bunch of people that are stuck within predispositions because they're stuck within their own pathwork of no one else is going to, they haven't found their worth yet. Remember, there's layers to your shit. There's acknowledging that you love yourself and then building in the love of yourself. Then ultimately becoming in balancing union with yourself. Those are the steps. A lot of you have been doing your work this entire time. It's now time to turn it consciously on and continue going forward. A lot of you have spaces that are a lot of y'all have a space that y'all can go to, but you're not building within that space. You're simply depending on the space to give you everything that you need without you really doing the work. This is for a lot of y'all that are in these relationships where y'all got the chick there and she really don't do nothing, and except for some physical fun shit, but she really don't do anything else. And since you stuck in something in you's missing something that you have not found in yourself, and you took that urge to the highest aspect, you feel like you need that there. That way you can automatically go right back to that anchor. That's why I don't be trusting motherfuckers, because all they do is lay up and use my shit. Nigga, that's your fault. That nigga used me all them years. Sis, that's your fault. Because if you when you understand your value, you're going to put the taxes on it. You're going to put the state, federal, and local taxes on it. Shipping and handling. Processing fees. You're going to put your fees on your value. There's fees that come with my value. Me knowing my value, there's fees that come with my shit. Can you pay these fees? Because remember, it ain't the sale, it's the service. It ain't the sale, it's the service. You can sell somebody a dream, But they're not staying for the dream. They're staying for the service. They staying for the service. You sold them your dream. You sold them your trauma. They bought the trauma. They bought the trauma. They bought the vice. They bought the problem. They bought it. They bought it when you gave it to them. But now you got to pay the service. Now you got to keep providing the service for them to stay. Your initial services is how you going to keep that shit going. This is why after you start separate, this is the most important part when you got to start removing the external vices to understand yourself and build the internal truth of the internal narrative of truth within yourself before you actually can add these things to the aspect. Like I use for an example, I only drink on Friday nights. It's not a need or a want. It's based on I'm sipping with my ancestors and the spirits. I'm sipping with my very alcoholic uncles that are now transitioned. I'm sipping with drunken masters that are my uncles. I'm sipping with them. I'm sipping with the known and my unknown spiritual teams. So I only drink on Fridays. Cause that's when I do Friday night lecture. That's a big ritual for me. That's a ritual for me. I don't have a need for it anymore. My body already creates. I'm already in that altered state of being. So I don't need to create a nemesis. You see how that works? I don't have to create the phantom. I don't have to chase the phantom. Let me go to this because I had some more stuff written down about the phantom. Yeah, I don't have to chase the phantom. You dig? I don't have to chase the phantom. I don't have to create a relationship. In the deeper aspects of you creating that relationship in that phantom complex is you're going to create something that's never been there. For a lot of us, we create that phantom complex we create this relationship, we create this phantom nemesis that is the opposite of our mother. That's why that's why we can say we hate our mothers, but we create an archetype that we can filter their energy through. Just like what I told you earlier, like my mother was in the position that she was in. She wasn't moving from it because she wasn't doing that internal work. And I knew she wasn't. Unconsciously, I knew she wasn't inherently. So I created a phantom aspect of a relationship with her that was based upon the things that she could do for me. So I could manipulate the situation. My mother was always in need of money. I learned that I can make money. So I would give my mother money. That way, when it came time to paying up, I can go over there freely as I wanted. That happened in relationships. This happened within relationships, that false sense of control in relationships, the false sense of control at my job. I always created a phantom nemesis to sustain within that space. The alter ego that was hated by everything else within that space. It was made of a pure negative intent. It was created from the anchor in that predestination complex of the energy of the pure negative intent. That's why it's sustained. And it existed, it lasted, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. But in order for me to step forward, I had to destroy these nemesis. In order for me to start renewing my soul and reintegrating my soul aspects of myself and bringing myself whole, I had to start killing off the phantom nemesis. Because my phantom nemesis were only reflections of my past lives. That's the precondition on the deeper level, or the quantum, the metaphysical level. You keep living out the lives of every one of your lives. When you face that life, then in your present tense, that's when you get those karmic relationships in karma relationships are not just based on love interests. You're talking about like friends, even family members. Like my littlest sister, she was my daughter from my second life. My older sister, my older twin sister, she was like, we was together in my first life. This is how that it keeps repeating itself until you understand the aspects and the cross points within the space. You just keep creating shit over and over and over again. So from 1 year when you was the chick, for the brothers that you a chick and now you act little bitch asses, you act little bitches, you a little bitch ass nigga sometimes. It's because in a past life you was a woman. To the chick that act really, really mannish, and now you in your current life right now and you a woman, everything that's happening to you right now you did back then. That shit don't clear up. That's your karmic debt coming to you. This is further going into the aspects of mastering the complexes of yourself. Because you created each one of these points. You created each one of these contracts. And it's up to you to deal with them. Sit down with yourself. Really sit down with yourself. Sit down with yourself and start doing this work. If it resonated with you, stay tuned for the plug talk and you find out how. Thank you for choosing the God Hour. Album coming up. Welcome to the Plug Talk. Gotta go Alkhemist. You know it's the God Talk, Plug Talk. Keep y'all up to date with what we doing here in the God world, in the world, the universe, the Gotta go Alkhemist. You know, last week we got into assimilation. This week we getting into something even deeper. God Go Alkhemist, the YouTube channel. We're getting into this week, we're getting the Ultra Instinct. Mastering the quantum mastering of self. So tune in for that. Last week was very impactful. Always doing something new. Last Friday, during the Q&A, did a few readings, getting everything still in tune. If you're interested within readings, like I said earlier in the show, Gotta go AlchemistLLC.com. Everything from the general readings, clarity readings, cutting the core readings, that shadow reading that's accompanied with the shadow work consultation. Get that for that shadow work, inner child work, anything, all of those narratives. Gotta go AlchemistLLC.com. If you follow me on Facebook at Rock Calling Music, you can hit me in the inbox. Serious inquiries only. Hit me at Papa_Lucy666 on my Instagram. Serious inquiries only. There's no excuse if it resonates with you and it brings you into that space that you know it's time for you to do that inner child work. There's nothing stopping you. I desire you to be the fucking best. And the only way for you to become the best is to take that first step. Invest in the change. First, you must acknowledge the change is in the absolute change, and then invest into it. Gotta go AlchemistLLC.com. I'm honored. Much gratitude to the ones that I help. OccultAlchemy.myshopify.com. You know, I play for the merchandise from the tapestries to the shirts to the hoodies. To the tapestries, shirts, hoodies. Shirts, hoodies. The spring line, the spring summer aspects coming out pretty soon. Call AlchemyMyShopify.com. That's a way to support that. even the new tapestries, got a lot more stuff coming out on that, merchandise, other things of that nature. And of course, Loops Wasabi's Cash App link. Support the growth. Donate to the Love Fund, so I can continue creating and bringing that content, bringing it straight to your ear each and every week, bringing it to your eyes each and every Friday, Monday through Thursday, meditate and elevate everything we're growing into. If you're interested in building and doing build with an episode, if you have a product or a service that you would like to get onto the God Hour podcast, hit me up at set, S-E-T, Carlos, C-A-R-L-O, Negus, Negus at gmail.com. Felt like I dropped that in a little ball. But set Carlos Negus at gmail.com. And we can discuss sponsorship, the sponsorship fees, get you into the podcast. If you want to do a build, I love doing builds and breakdowns of different topics that are always provocative to change the narrative. I want you to be the fucking best. The only way to become the best is by you tuning in to that internal self, to find that inner truth by silencing the reactions, so you can get into that response, you can get that information. Yeah, if you're listening, of course, today being the only day that matters, then tonight is going to definitely be the only night that drives God Hour Show. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. New topic. Live readings. I do live readings at a little special discount. 1 card, $333. 3 cards, $777. 4 cards, $15.15. Yes, $15.15 for the full 5 card spread. Only during the God Hour Show. Other than that, stay tuned for the closeout. Don't ask me why they did the lighter flick. I'm sorry. Not really. But yeah. So we got into anchoring. Got into the aspects of the predestination complex. And we got into Phantom Nemesis. Now everybody's going to be like, that had nothing to do with the name words of attachment. Yeah, it did. All of that had to do with attachment. Because in anchoring, it's about what you're anchoring to and why. The mother, the father, son, sister, brother, cousin, whatever it may be, family member, job. We all have those anchors that we have to deal with. I've had anchors. Even in this, even at this space in my time, like I had anchors that I had to deal with. A lot of my anchors are basically, the higher that you go, the more mental it becomes. I'm going to give you that. This is the tidbit. The higher that you go and the more healed that you become, the more mental it becomes. So before I could even like really establish G.O.D Alkhemist LLC, my brand, my company, establish Occult Alchemy, establish these aspects, I had to go remove myself from the predestination complex. And the underline for the anchors that kept me within the predestination complex was the mindset of getting paid a paycheck every week. I had to remove that because until I couldn't fully align with my aspects of my abundance, I would have been stuck in that pattern, and then my energy would have been depleted, and then I would have been creating all these different nemesis that most motherfuckers create. Man, black people, man, we can't go to the bank and get no loan, so I can't start my business. Nigga, almost 86% of businesses are right now online anyway. That old mentality, the brick and mortar don't even exist anymore. When this is well established, I do it from online. I do the video calls. I can do the energy readings from that. If I got to travel, I travel. It won't be until like 2-3 years from now before like I create a a space for that. But I don't need that space. When it's time for that to happen, it's gonna come into that play. Why? Because I've defined my terms of my engagement. I'm no longer using the old Nemesis. When we think about those old Nemesis, those buzzwords, shit that get to you is only based because you created something to feed off of it. You're not acting the same. Of course you ain't acting the same. You're no longer using that shield, that mask or that sheltered shell that you like to use to stay within your space. You ain't using it no more. You used to have fun. You don't be having fun no more. Fuck you mean? I still have fun. If you knew what I did on days on days where I don't have any readings or I don't have any sessions, everything, I can sit here and read as many books as I want, watch TV, laugh at shit, watch cartoons. I spent a whole day one day watching cartoons. But that's not for you to see. You ain't ready for that yet. You have to understand those levels in your engagement of you going into your space. Another big thing for you understand the levels within your space is do not compare your work to other individuals. Do not compete with other individuals and their work. Because if you're always stuck in competition and always stuck comparing yourself to the work of others, you will never learn from them. That's the reason they're within your space. I say this to a lot of my clients because I actually have a client that starts their therapy on Wednesday. Their first initial thought of me was they had this underlying fear because of how I spoke. But once they listened to when I was talking about impulse and imprint, they told me about what episode they watched, ego death. They listened to ego death, and they were like, the way you said it resonated with me. I knew I had to come into this space. I was afraid that there would be no need for you to come to the space to get the work and do your work if you were where I'm in that predisposed space. I'm that challenge because every day I challenge myself. So by nature, by the natural reflection, I'm challenging everybody else. I have no competition. You have no competition. The challenges that you face are going to teach you the acceptance, are going to teach you the acknowledgement, the acceptance, the apology / the forgiveness. It's going to challenge you to thank yourself. It's going to challenge you to thank those individuals that came into your space. It's going to force you to challenge. It's going to force you to congratulate yourself for cutting those anchors. Congratulating yourself for taking yourself out of those old predestination complexes. It's going to take you to a space to where you're thanking that nemesis, that phantom that you created to sustain that space. You're going to be thanking that shit. Because without it, you would not have learned and been challenged to get to the internal truth and the authenticity that is the divine greatness that is you. I just want you to be fucking great. I love being fucking great. It's lit over here. Don't let you know that now. It's lit over here. Once you let go, if you've seen any vampire fucking movie, once you let go, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. But you gotta, the truth is gonna set you free. But then but first it gotta fuck you up. That's because it's preparing you and detaching you from all the attachments so you can connect to your higher self. It's been another episode of the God Hour Podcast. If you listening tonight, today being the only day, you listening today, you know tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Rock Calling Nijas, Facebook Live, God Hour Show, live readings, get deep into a topic. It's a party over there. It's a party every time we all go live. I love you. I see y'all throughout the week. We love us. Only a few of us is going to step up to that calling. Only a few of us is going to step into that door. Even the few that get into that darkness, only a few are going to build and create that new light. Which one are you? I love you. We love us. Ashe.